a hard-working New Mexico family.
My dad was up at 4 in the morning, wouldn't go down till 10 o'clock at night.
She was always the type of person to just help everybody.
Is murdered on Father's Day.
My parents are dead.
They were covered in so much blood.
That was the worst I've ever seen.
Police uncover a loving family.
He was a shaken baby. We were told he may never walk again.
With a startling criminal connection.
She has a history of burglaries.
And a jaw-dropping revelation.
I absolutely was shocked. I didn't think I have ever known anybody in my life who could do something that brutal.
To this day, I still can't understand how the person could do something this tragic, this gruesome.
They said, I know who did it, I know who did it.
A tiny New Mexico town home to just a few hundred families. A place filled with honest, hardworking people.
It's a very tight-knit community. It's kind of one of those places where everybody knows everybody.
On Father's Day 2011, police receive a 911 call that shatters the early evening calm.
Santa Fe 911, where's your emergency?
Dancing boy! Carl!
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know, I just went there and put the ass on the phone. He told me I walked over to check on him and I think it was in the yard.
Okay. I can't hear you when you're yelling. Try not to yell into the phone, I can't understand you.
My parents are dead.
The caller is a 35-year-old woman named Cherie Ortiz Rios. Officers arrive at the property she shares with her parents, Lloyd and Dixie Ortiz. Police enter the home occupied by Cherie's parents and her brother to investigate, starting with the master bedroom.
Had observed a female laying face down in her nightgown attire, deceased.
The brutality that was involved was unspeakable.
She had some trauma on the right side of her temple region.
Police believe this is Cherie's 53-year-old mother, Dixie Ortiz.
As you walk out through the main door to the bedroom, there's a couple of steps up into a kitchen. That's where a deceased male was laying face down. That was probably the worst I've ever seen. There was several defects in his head and shoulder area.
Cherie tells police that this is the body of her 21-year-old brother, Stephen.
As you walk back out the room to the rear of the residence, there was another deceased male laying face down. And he had several injuries to his upper torso and his head region.
The dead man is Cherie's 58-year-old father, Lloyd. Detectives called in the medical examiner to take charge of the bodies. For now, they can only speculate about the cause and time of death.
There were limitations on how well we could examine the injuries because they were covered in so much blood.
It looked like something that had penetrated all of their bodies. So at that point, led us to believe that they were actually shot with some type of a firearm.
While the medical examiner carefully removes the bodies, a forensics team meticulously looks for evidence.
We did not find any shell casings. There wasn't a gun located. There was nothing that indicated that we had our murder weapon at the scene. We have no physical evidence as far as some type of a fingerprint. There weren't any footwear impressions in any of the blood. Maybe we can get some DNA, but we don't know that initially. That has to be sent to the lab for testing. With this type of crime scene, generally there's only a couple different types of motive. It's love, money, or anger. So we have to look into those. Lloyd's wallet was on the counter right next to where Stephen was lying in the kitchen. It had money in it. It didn't look like somebody was in there to steal from them.
There's no evidence to suggest this is a robbery, so police consider whether other motives could have been at play.
Who would stand to gain something from killing 3 people on Father's Day in their house?
Police need to learn more about the victims and their family. They turn to Cherie, who lives just steps away.
On the 2/3 of the property, Lloyd, Dixie, and their son, Stephen, lived, and the other third was occupied by Lloyd and Dixie's daughter, Cherie, her husband, Jesse, and their 2 children, Catalina and Robert.
When her sister arrives, a despondent Cherie can barely keep it together.
I remember my sister running up to me and telling me, I'm sorry, that my mom and my dad and my brother were dead.
There were nothing I could do or say to make it better for her. 'Cause I love my sister so much, so much.
Cherie and Angela choke back tears as they tell police all about the most important people in their lives.
My mom and dad were the best parents that I could ever ask for. They were always there, always accepted us for who we were, always stood by our side, no matter what.
Lloyd was a tile contractor who was popular in the town.
My dad was amazing. Up at 4 a.m, wouldn't go down till probably 10 o'clock at night every day.
Lloyd had been married to Dixie for 34 years. She worked in a nursing home.
She didn't even think of that as being a job. It was just who she was.
Dixie's selfless, caring manner didn't stop with her work. In 1989, when their daughters were just teens, she and Lloyd took in a baby in need.
Stephen was 7 months old when he came into our home as a foster child. He was a shaken baby. His left side of the body was paralyzed. He had cerebral palsy. We were told that he may never walk, talk.
I would grab him out of the crib and stick him right next to me in bed, and he would sleep right next to me. I just loved him so much.
As he grew, the family's love helped transform Stephen into a strong and happy little boy.
Walking, potty training, the developmental milestones, they took a lot longer for him to reach, but he reached every single one of them.
Stephen was part of our church, and he was such an absolute joy. He would greet everybody. Everybody in church loved him. He made it a point to talk to everybody. He was quite a young man.
Stephen, Lloyd, and Dixie's lives have been cut tragically short. But why would someone murder such a loving family? Police find one possible reason: growing outside.
There were several marijuana plants that were being grown. There was a fenced-off area where there was 17 plants growing.
These plants were not visible unless you were directly over them. It was a very tight oxygen area that was padlocked.
A marijuana crop under lock and key outside the family home piqued detectives' interest. Had they just uncovered an illegal drug operation?
My parents had a medical marijuana card for my brother and a grower's license. So they were legally growing medical marijuana for my brother.
My brother had 2 brain surgeries to relieve some of the pressure in his brain, and so they prescribed medical marijuana to him to help relieve the headaches he was having. They were pretty debilitating at times.
The family had known that Lloyd was growing the marijuana for Stephen, and the family would smoke some of the marijuana.
While the marijuana was being grown legally, detectives suspect that it could have attracted the attention of the wrong people.
Was this some type of a drug-related incident?
Police become even more concerned when Cherie and her husband Jesse relay a story about a few suspicious characters they heard outside their home on the night of the murder.
They indicated that they were watching a movie that ended between 1:30 and 2 o'clock in the morning. Their dog started barking, and Jesse got up and walked to the front window. He saw a car that was parked outside.
He heard a kid yelling out there. He heard somebody say, "Hurry up, come on." And he was like, "There's somebody out there." And so he went back in and even grabbed a gun. And he got in his truck and he drove his truck toward that car.
Coming up, the autopsy reveals an unexpected cause of death.
It's not generally your weapon of choice. It's extremely violent, it's brutal.
And the town is stunned when the killer is revealed.
People were in disbelief. As a pastor, it was hard for me to even fathom.
Hours after Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen Ortiz are found dead, Police are hunting for the driver of a car seen outside the home the night before the murders.
We interviewed Lloyd and Dixie's daughter, Cherie, and she said that her husband, Jesse, saw a car that was parked outside and to the left of the property. He had indicated that the vehicle was a gray car.
The dog started barking crazy. My husband, Jesse, he came out and even got in his truck.
Cherie tells police Jesse followed the vehicle in his truck. But when detectives interview Jesse, he tells them a completely different story.
In Jesse's interview, he had failed to mention that he actually left the house that evening.
You never left the house?
No.
Why would your wife say you left the house?
That I left the house.
Why would she say that?
Maybe because I was outside or something.
She said she heard you leave the house. Why would she say that?
I don't know.
It was pretty concerning that he would forget one of the biggest details of that evening with his involvement.
As detectives continue to press Jesse, he suddenly remembers details from the night before.
Jesse.
You know what? I might have left the house. When I seen the car parked. You know what? That is correct. That is correct.
You see the issue?
Yeah, I do. I forgot about that.
It's something you don't just forget about, Jesse.
Well, I'm serious, man.
Man to man. You know where I'm going. Right. It's time to start talking.
I did. I do remember, because I remember going back down there to get my keys. And I did get in my truck. And I drove towards the dead end that way.
What happened then?
I passed by.
Why would you not confront somebody right there?
Because I didn't expect anything.
Jesse, lying to me, dude.
I'm not lying to you, bro. I'm telling you the truth.
Jesse's changing story now has police eyeing him as a suspect. And when they ask him about his relationship with his in-laws, they think they may have hit upon a motive.
We found out something very alarming. There was some stuff in the close past that had caused some family tension between Lloyd and Jesse. And we knew at one point Lloyd was embarrassed of the way that Cherie and Jesse's property looked, so he actually built a fence in between the two properties so he didn't have to look at it anymore. So we knew there was some tension there.
Police can't rule out that tension in the family could have boiled over. Could Jesse have slipped out of the house and committed 3 heinous murders over a minor family squabble? To get to the truth, police grilled the couple about where they were the night of the murder.
They told us the timeline of where they were. They went to a casino. They were there for X amount of time, drove to their residence. They put in a movie right away. They were able to identify almost minute for minute of what they did that entire day, which is kind of unusual.
And when police ask Cherie about finding the bodies, she tearfully gives them a detailed account of the horror that unfolded.
And I walked in and I was like, Mom. And then I walked over to her to shake her, and her head was blown. And so I ran to the kitchen to check for my brother and my dad, and I thought it was my dad laying on the floor in his underwear because his face was so blown off. And so I ran home screaming for my husband. And my husband went back and he said, honey, that's Stephen in the kitchen. Your dad's dead in the backyard.
Cherie's story is plausible, but one thing she can't explain is something she told police when she called 911.
They're dead. They have gunshot wounds to the head. They're dead. They've been dead since the morning.
Cherie said that she knew if she would have went over there, she could have saved him that morning, which told me that she had intimate knowledge of when the homicides actually occurred, which pretty concerning. How would she know that? We didn't know that timeline of when they were actually killed.
Detectives are no longer suspicious of just Jesse. Is it possible that the Ortiz's own daughter could be involved as well?
We did obtain DNA samples from Cherie and Jesse to try and analyze to see if there was anything that could be matched.
Police searched Cherie and Jesse's home, hoping to find a physical link to the murder. With so much activity in the tiny town of El Rancho, news of the crime spreads.
My wife and I raced down to the property. When we had got there, there was quite a few people there. Cherie was just outside herself. She was just hysterical.
Detectives can't help but wonder if Cherie's tears are genuine, yet they're unable to find any physical evidence to link Cherie or Jesse to the murders. When the autopsy report comes back the next day, they hope the results will help them shed some light on the mystery.
I actually did attend the autopsy, and during the course of the autopsy, the pathologist informed us that the wounds sustained were the result of impact trauma. They were killed with a pickaxe. Stephen Ortiz, the son of Lloyd and Dixie, received 17 blows to the head from the pickaxe. Evidently, the victims were beaten long after they were already deceased.
The amount of force that was used to cause this was extreme. My initial reaction was, who had this much anger to want to kill him in such a gruesome manner?
After receiving the autopsy report on a horrific triple homicide in El Rancho, New Mexico, detectives have just discovered that the Ortiz family was killed with a pickaxe. Now that police know what to look for, they quickly set out to find the murder weapon.
One of the agents remembers seeing a Maddox-style pickaxe lying in an adjacent field to the west of the residence. So we immediately went to the scene and found our pickaxe covered in blood. Processed it to the crime scene lab in Santa Fe and waited for results.
There was a lot of hope that there was going to be potential evidence that would link the assailant to the pickaxe.
There was nothing. There was nothing there. We got DNA that was identified on the pickaxe from the 3 victims. Nobody else.
Still, the murder weapon does tell police something about the killer.
It would take a great deal of force to cause that type of injury.
Police had to consider whether either of their suspects were strong enough to commit the crime. Jesse was capable. Was Cherie? While police search for answers, the small town of El Rancho is gripped with fear.
The whole community was on high alert. This kind of crime is very unusual for that area.
All we knew was that there were 3 dead people that the community loved, and nobody knew why and how.
Police continue to look into the alibis of the main suspects, Cherie Ortiz and her husband Jesse Rios, who said they'd been to a casino that night. Investigators see if their story can be verified.
They were seen on surveillance video at a gas station, and then they went to a casino.
This supports the couple's claims. Investigators also track what they did the rest of the evening.
We were able to pinpoint the length of time that it would take to drive from the casino to their house.
The timeline puts them in their home, right next door to the murders, at the time of the crime. But it's not nearly enough evidence to pursue a case. Police hope to utilize the publicity surrounding the murders and make an appeal for tips.
Everybody wanted to say who they thought it was, but didn't have any merit behind any of the stuff they were coming forward with.
Detectives also combed through their witness interviews and hit on a name they hadn't considered before.
Initially, Angela had mentioned that Nicholas Ortiz was a 16-year-old, just a regular kid in the community. Cherie had a son that was Nicholas's age, and they went to school together.
Nick Ortiz had a positive relationship with the family. There's no relation, by the way, between Nick Ortiz and the 3 Ortizes who were victim. It's just same last name.
Nicholas's family lived right up the road from us, and that's how him and my son had become friends.
He was having some troubles at home. Eventually, my sister opened up her home to him, gave him his own room.
He would go over next door to Lloyd and Dixie's house, They would give him money, they took him to the flea market, they took him everywhere. So they basically just treated him like he was one of the family.
But the transition to family member wasn't all smooth.
My husband and I had caught Nicholas going through our drawers. We had just started noticing a little bit of money missing. Things moved. So we started giving him an allowance every week for the chores he was doing as well.
Nick's troubles extended to school, too.
Nick had come home from school, and you could tell he had been punched in the face and was kind of beat up. I freaked out. Oh my God, who did this to you? He said, I joined a gang with some friends of mine, and I had to let them beat me up. And I was like, okay, so now today we're gonna have the anti-gang talk. And I mean, we did.
The family tells police that joining a gang was just one example of the problems Nick brought to their home.
One night, my father had asked my son to cut down a plum tree that was dead in his backyard. And when they went out there, Nick was hiding behind some raised flower beds they had in their backyard. And the backyard was a secured area for the 2 little dogs they had, so both gates were locked from the inside. So he had to have jumped the fence to get back there.
Nick basically jumped up and kind of went towards him, in a joking manner, like to scare him. And Lloyd wasn't impressed by it. He didn't think it was funny.
After stealing from the family and joining a gang, this was the final straw for Lloyd.
He basically told Nick that he was not welcome at that property ever again.
It made us feel on guard and very uncomfortable, and we think it's best that it's time for him to move back home. I then text Nicholas and told him that he could come and pick up all the clothing and furniture that we had purchased for him over that time period, and he could take it home with him. I never really saw him again after that.
Could the Ortiz's rejection of Nicholas lead him to kill? Had he murdered Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen in cold-blooded revenge? The police bring in Nick for questioning.
Do you know anything about this case?
Police in El Rancho, New Mexico have a new suspect in the murders of Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen Ortiz. An unrelated 16-year-old named Nicholas Ortiz.
Do you know anything about this case that could help us?
I don't. The only thing that I've heard is what people have told me from the news.
He came off as this calm kid that didn't do anything wrong. He was just kind of like your baseline kid.
Detectives confront Nicholas about his speedy exit from the Ortiz home.
Lloyd just told you. What exactly did he say? You remember?
Yeah. Telling me that I effed up my trust with them, not to go near them anymore or anything. I said, okay, fine. So what you guys want to do? And that was really the last time we spoke.
Okay. How did you feel then?
The detectives ask where he was the night of the murder.
He said he was at home with his dad and sisters leading up to Father's Day. Between 12 and 1 o'clock, he woke his father up and wished him a happy Father's Day and went back to bed. And he was there when his mom got off of work, which was around 7:30 in the morning. Everything was corroborated as far as his alibi.
Not only does Nicholas have a solid alibi, his demeanor in the interview doesn't suggest he is the killer.
Do you think if you found out who did that?
If I found out who did it, I would call the police right away.
Police find people in the community who vouch for Nick.
Nicholas was part of our congregation. He was very, very gentlemanlike. He was kind. He was willing to help. He would stay late sometimes and help us pick up after the church.
Police cross Nicholas Ortiz off the suspect list. Then, 2 days after the murder, they get an urgent call from Cherie Ortiz.
I called the police and I told them we found out about a safe that was well hidden, enough where my sister and I didn't even know it existed, at my parents' house. My Uncle Walter had called me and said, I built your dad a secret piece of furniture that would hide a safe in it.
The unit was so well concealed, the police had not found it when they searched the house days earlier.
I said, I do not want to know any more until we contact the police. So we had to have it opened up there at the police station.
Inside was $80,000 in cash, as well as some of the life insurance paperwork.
That's when we found that my dad had been saving money for years. He had his retirement saved in there.
Cherie says she didn't know about the money, but police make a discovery that puts her claim in doubt.
We had learned through district court that the power of attorney had been given to Cherie at this point, and she was basically going to be the heir of hundreds of thousands of dollars in life insurance policies that Lloyd and Dixie had. And that $80,000 that was in the safe was part of a cash out from those life insurance policies.
Cherie says she didn't know about the insurance policy. The inheritance was large enough to give Cherie and Jesse a powerful motive for murder. But motive alone wasn't enough to arrest either one of them.
We have no physical evidence that could tie Cherie and Jesse to the crime.
The discovery of the safe also causes police to speculate on how the Ortizes had amassed so much money. Could it have anything to do with the marijuana growing on the property?
Kind of raised some concern to us as to why he was growing it. Are they possibly selling this stuff?
Detectives investigate whether Lloyd was secretly involved in trafficking. The answer comes back clear.
Nothing was taken from this house. It didn't even appear that whoever was there at the time knew that there was pot plants being grown behind this fence. And knowing anything about the industry of marijuana, there were smaller plants, they weren't mature. We were able to pretty much rule out that the gangs were tied in to this.
It's another blow for the investigation. And as days turn to weeks, detectives are no closer to catching those responsible.
Essentially, you do run out of leads or you run into dead ends. As frustrating as it was for us as investigators, it had to have been exponentially worse for the family.
I was on the phone with the police every single day asking, what have they heard? Anything new? What can I do to help? And we were always told, nothing. There's nothing you can do.
I truly felt like they were not ever going to solve this case.
Then, 16 months after the murders, detectives get the break they've been praying for when they receive a call from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department.
In October of 2012, I had just gotten home from work and I got a call that there's somebody there that wants to give some information to me in reference to the homicide. And she was in jail. She said she just wants to get something off her chest.
A new tip will finally help solve the murders of Lloyd, Dixie, and Stephen Ortiz. The information comes from a young woman in the custody of Santa Fe police.
Ashley Ball was 24, and she has a history of burglaries and of drug use.
Ashley told officers that she knew something about the El Rancho murders. At that point, ears started to perk within law enforcement.
Before questioning Ashley, police look into her background.
Ashley grew up in El Rancho.
Ashley wasn't necessarily a troubled teen per se, but she got in trouble a lot.
From a young age was in and out of the detention center.
Lead detective Craig Bobnock questions Ashley about what she knows.
As I started explaining that it was a voluntary interview, she kept interrupting me saying, I know who did it, I know who did it.
Ashley claims that on the night of the murder, she was smoking weed with her cousin, Jose Roybal, and a mutual friend.
They needed money, so they were gonna go hit the Ortiz's house. And I took them, I dropped them off, and I went back home.
She told me that she owned a gray 1997 Saturn car, two-door car, during the time of the homicide. So I immediately thought of Jesse's statement.
Cherie Ortiz's husband, Jesse Rios, had told police he saw a gray car driving slowly past their house late on the night of the murder. But it's what Ashley says next that grabs detectives' attention.
I got a call about maybe half an hour, 45 minutes later.
The call was from Jose's friend, and he needed a ride.
He got in my car. He had blood on his pants. He had a trash bag tied around his right foot. That's when he told me that he killed Stephen, Dixie, and Lloyd. He said he threw the pickaxe by the fence. He kept saying he killed him, he messed up, he killed him.
Ashley told me that the single person that killed the Ortiz family was Nick Ortiz.
Ashley's revelation is explosive. This family took in Nick when he was having trouble at home.
He stayed there for upwards of a couple of months, in which he got very close with the family. He would eat there, he would get off the school bus there. It was basically his home, and they took him in.
But police need to be sure Ashley's telling the truth. After all, she has a rap sheet, and their suspect has an alibi.
The information that Ashley Roybal provided had to have come from somebody who was actually there during the incident.
Ashley explains another detail that puts her at the scene.
Do they wear gloves? Do they care about fingerprints usually?
He had a sock on his hand.
He did have a sock on his hand?
Mm-hmm.
Police are hopeful they can find evidence in Ashley's car, but it's nowhere to be found.
It's 18 months later. She had said she had sold it to a tow company. The vehicle ultimately ended up at the shredder. Couldn't find it.
Investigators had to find another way to verify her story.
I received a lot of the phone logs, and that was my big piece of evidence at this point.
Cell phone records show the communication between Nicholas, Ashley, and her cousin Jose peaked around the time of the murders, so investigators immediately bring Nick back in to confront him with the evidence.
So I brought Nick in. He's in 100% denial of everything until I bring up the phone records.
I'm just going to show you, these are your texts between you and Jose. You're the orange and he's the white. That's how much you guys texted on Saturday night into Sunday morning. Is it surprising?
Well, with all due respect to you guys and all that, I'd really like to just stop talking and go home now.
Okay.
I want another chance at another interview with him, so I didn't want to ruin it. So we ended the interview.
Investigators' next move is to haul in Jose for questioning. Since he's a minor, they get permission from his parents to speak to him.
He was 15 at the time. He drank a lot. He had problems at home. He didn't have a good reputation.
Police talk to Jose, and he opens up.
Ashley dropped me and Nick off so we could go around the house. She left. Nick told me he would go in. He wanted me to go in with him to go kill him. And I told him no. I didn't want to. I was scared. He started walking towards the house. When he started walking towards the house, I ran to the river. I got to my house. And then Ashley and Nick show up. Nick is white as a ghost. I knew he had did it. He told me he had did it. He told me he did it.
Jose's story matches Ashley's, and suddenly police have two witnesses against Nicholas.
On February 12th, 2015, I got the approval from the district attorney to get an arrest warrant for Nick Ortiz. District court judge signed it and said, go pick him up.
Just like before, Nicholas remains uncooperative.
So I brought him in a copy of the criminal complaint. There were 5 total charges on the criminal complaint that I gave him. He said, I don't agree with 2 of these charges on here. And there were only 2 charges that were different from murder. So it's an admission to me. I knew I had him at that point. It was him.
With Nicholas taken into custody, detectives finally have some news for the Ortiz family.
I absolutely was shocked when the police said he had done this. I didn't think I have ever known anybody in my life who could do something like that brutal. I've never met anybody that could hurt people so grossly. It didn't make sense because that was not at all his personality when he lived with us.
People were in disbelief. As a pastor, it was hard for me to even fathom the fact that a young man like this could do something so tragic, this gruesome.
On June 15th, 2015, Nicholas goes to trial for massacring the Ortiz family.
Nick was a minor at the time. Given the fact that this was a heinous triple homicide, the judge did agree with my office that Nicholas should be charged as an adult.
When the trial starts, the prosecution is confident of a conviction until an unexpected development jeopardizes the whole case.
So in the middle of trial, we received a big surprise in Jose changing his testimony completely.
Nicholas Ortiz alone stands accused of a savage triple murder. His two former friends are taking plea bargains to testify against him. But just as prosecutors think it's a cut and dry case, the unexpected happens.
So in the middle of trial, we received a big surprise in Jose changing his testimony completely, pointing at Ashley as the individual who instructed them to kill the family.
Originally, the plan was to rob the Ortiz family, but according to Jose, Ashley had something more sinister in mind.
Jose Roybal testified that Ashley said, "Why don't you just kill them?"
It's a stunning statement, which the defense denies.
The case agent said, "Well, she said she didn't say that." And then the lawyer said, "Yeah, but Jose Roybal says she did, so somebody must be lying." Jose testified that Ashley gave the two boys socks to cover up their hands and plastic bags with Kleenex in them to cover up their feet so that they wouldn't leave traces there. He also said that she is the one that handed Nick the weapon.
According to Jose, in the early hours of June 19th, 2011, Ashley tells Nicholas and Jose it's time to put her unthinkable plan into action.
Ashley takes Jose and Nick to the Ortiz house, drops them off.
Jose got scared. He left. He ran home. Nick went towards the house.
He knocks on the back door. Lloyd Ortiz gets up out of bed. When he opens it, he's attacked by Nicholas with the pickaxe.
He didn't stop there. He went into the house and struck Dixie twice in her temple on the right side of her head with the pickaxe.
Nicholas moved on to the kitchen looking for the money, but he found Stephen instead.
Recognizing who is in his house, Stephen puts up a fight.
Nick delivers 17 blows to his head and body and kills him.
After Nick killed the three Ortizes, he didn't take anything. He got scared, so he just left. He walked out the door and called Ashley.
The revelations come as a shock to the victim's family.
Every day that we were at that trial, it was devastating because we learned things. I learned things that I didn't know. And I wish I hadn't, because it still haunts me.
Nick doesn't say a thing during the entire trial. It's Jose's word against Ashley's. How would their competing testimonies affect the jury?
The case was based almost entirely on Ashley and Jose's testimony, and that was a point of contention amongst people up until the sentencing.
After 3.5 days, I remember the jury went into the courtroom and the foreperson said, we're just no matter how much time you give us, we're just not going to come to a consensus. So the judge had no choice but to declare a mistrial.
It was horrible. It was devastating to me.
I felt like our hearts had been ripped out. We had all this hope.
Luckily, we have the opportunity to try him again, which we did.
17 months later, in December 2016, the case goes back to court.
Luckily, this time around, we proved to all 12 jurors that Nicholas Ortiz was the individual that killed those 3 people.
On October 28, 2019, Nicholas is sentenced to 25 years in prison. The victory rings hollow for the victims' loved ones.
What that felt like to me was each victim, my mom, my dad, and my brother, was only worth 8 years each. That's exactly what that is. It's a joke. That's not justice.
He's gonna do probably 12 to 15 years. No way. No way.
Ashley Roybal received a 20-year sentence. 6 years of that was suspended, so 14 years of incarceration.
Jose got full immunity for his testimony. He never got so much as probation.
Even though years have passed since the murders, their effects remain.
I would say I'm sorry to my parents and my brother. I'm sorry I wasn't there to help you. So I would say I love you and I miss you and I'm so sorry.
I want them to be remembered through their compassion.
In Northern California, a fire rages in the middle of the night. A woman's charred body is discovered in the smoldering aftermath. But how she turned up dead remains a mystery. Detectives turn to forensic science in the hopes of uncovering the answers to their many questions. When investigators start sifting through the ashes, they have no idea it will lead to a trail of deception. This is a case of out-and-out lies, and not one, but 2 cold-blooded murders. When people trust their killer with their secrets, their money, and their lives, it can very well turn out to be a tragic case of misplaced loyalty. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. The city of Berkeley, California is well known for its hippie counterculture and bohemian lifestyle. Nestled in the rolling hills just across the bridge from San Francisco, it's a magnet for people of all walks of life. Criminals can hide in plain sight, making it a perfect place to cover up an insidious crime. In the early morning hours of June 25th, 1994, a loud explosion rocked the home of James Hutchings. It was 4 in the morning, and his next-door neighbor, Virginia Bailey's house, was on fire. He rushed to call the fire department, but took consolation in the knowledge that Bailey was out of town.
Yeah, there's a fire. My neighbor's house is on fire. Yes. 2912.
Do you know who lives here? Virginia Bailey? Is she at home right now? She's out of town. Okay, we're sending the fire department. We're on the way. Thank you.
Dispatchers immediately dispatched the Berkeley Fire Department to the scene. Firefighters rushed to what they thought was an unoccupied home. When they arrived, shooting flames were visible through the window. Working deliberately for several hours, the firemen extinguished the fire. Firefighters entered the house to make sure the fire was out. They noticed the majority of the damage from the blaze was in the dining room. Deputy Fire Marshal Wayne Inouye was on the scene.
When I got on the scene, I found a two-story residential dwelling. I went into the first floor, and the first floor wasn't that badly damaged. I proceeded up to the second floor, and that's where the majority of the fire damage was. There was a lot of smoke damage on the second floor, and in the dining room, there was heavy fire damage.
Hey Chuck, shine your light in there. Over to the right. What is that? Body? Is it a body?
It was there they made a shocking discovery. A body lying face down in the smoldering debris, clearly dead.
We've got a confirmed 8900 at this location. Notify the fire marshals. Better get the coroner started up this way.
They also noticed something odd about the scene. The room was virtually without furniture, and the body was found 6 feet from the fireplace. When firefighters discover a body, they are required to notify the coroner's office. Coroner technicians arrived on the scene. They noticed the victim had severe burns on both her head and her hands. James Hutchings was shocked to learn that his neighbor might have perished in the fire.
I heard a huge explosion. Heard an explosion.
He knew Virginia was supposed to be in Salt Lake City for a wedding. And if she were home, he wondered why her car was not in the driveway.
When you looked out the window, did you see anybody out there?
No.
Anybody running from the house?
Nope, just flames.
How about
flames and a lot of smoke?
With what they learned from the neighbor, investigators now turned to science to piece together the events that led to a tragic outcome. An autopsy was performed at the State Crime Lab in Berkeley, California. Even though Virginia Bailey was reportedly out of town, forensic experts identified the body using X-rays. The victim was Virginia Bailey. She was home at the time of the fire. But other evidence quickly deemed the exam anything but routine. Upon looking at the body, the first thing the ME noticed was severe decomposition, a finding inconsistent with the person who supposedly just died.
I think I'd like to look at the X-rays. What we're going to do is we're going to this up right here.
Even more telling were maggots found in the chest cavity and on the clothing of the corpse. Maggots usually take somewhere between 24 to 48 hours to appear, and do so only on dead bodies. But there could be no logical reason they would appear on the charred body of a fire victim so soon after her death. Dr. Paul Herman of the coroner's office reviewed the autopsy results and examined the photographs.
There was something peculiar about this case because there was evidence of decomposition of the body, even to the point that there were some maggots present on the body and in the clothing, indicating that this person had died long before this fire had occurred.
Since the autopsy revealed the presence of maggots, Entomologist Jeffrey Wells was brought in to help establish time of death. Due to their size, he was able to determine that Bailey died at least 3 days before she appeared to be killed in the fire.
If you estimate the age of a maggot found on a body, this gives you a pretty good minimum time since death. The reason for this is flies almost never deposit their eggs or larvae on a live person. Almost always the person must be dead when that happens. If I can estimate the age of a maggot, that gives me a minimum time since death. For example, if I pluck a maggot off of a corpse, and I am pretty sure that it is 3 days old, almost certainly that person has been dead for at least 3 days.
Dr. Wells definitively concluded that Virginia Bailey didn't die in the fire. Investigators' worst fears were coming to light. The case was now a criminal matter, and at the Berkeley Police Department, Inspector Al Bierce was assigned the file. Things clearly didn't add up, and Bierce needed to find out what or who had killed Virginia Bailey.
If she had died naturally, it would have been impossible for this fire to have occurred as a natural outgrowth of her death. For example, if she was walking across the room with some kind of a material and then suffered a heart attack, fell, started the fire, there wasn't going to be any decomposition there.
Bierce's first move was to meet with the victim's brother, who had some questions of his own. They began to create a timeline leading up to Virginia's death.
When was the last time that you talked to her by phone?
He hadn't heard from his sister for weeks before the fire.
He always got a call from his sister on his birthday. He didn't get a call. That was totally out of character for her.
Virginia and her brother were extremely close and had recently attended a friend's wedding.
Hello there. I just want both of you to know that I love
Her brother believed that something didn't sit right about his sister's disappearance.
see that both of you are just made for each other.
He said the two usually spoke all the time. Yet he had left messages on her answering machine and heard nothing back from her. Virginia's brother told Inspector Bierce that Christine Lloyd, Virginia's financial advisor, had been house-sitting for his sister. He also told him that some of Virginia's furniture was missing from her house.
That's all I've got for now. I know where you are down at the motel.
Inspector Bierce was faced with many questions. He was at the beginning of a complicated investigation. Bierce needed to uncover evidence to find out if someone had killed Virginia Bailey and tried to make it look like an accidental fire death.
What is that over there? You see how it goes around before it starts
And
to draw
perhaps
like that?
what he was looking for was buried in the ashes of the fire. A deadly fire ravaged the home of Virginia Bailey, and investigators grew suspicious. After only a preliminary investigation, Berkeley Police Inspector Al Bierce thought he had a murder on his hands. Autopsy reports revealed the presence of maggots on a body found at the scene of the fire. Scientists conclusively proved that Virginia Bailey had already been dead for at least 3 days before the fire started. Inspector Bierce decided to visit the scene of the crime firsthand. When he arrived, the fire investigator pointed out burn patterns.
There's no charring on the wood or anything, so it leads to believe that it didn't start here at the fireplace.
Things did not add up.
So this will be real important that we get this done.
They noticed evidence of pore patterns near the body.
Did we come in with a sniffer that night?
This would indicate the presence of an accelerant.
It was poured over the body.
And perhaps the most telling sign, the body was discovered over 6 feet from the fireplace.
I'm seeing it right here.
If the fire began in the fireplace, there should be burn marks that led to the body. there were none. The area directly surrounding the body was suspiciously intact. The investigator believed this was arson. He hoped those closest to Virginia could provide him with information as to how and why she died in the fire. He asked Christine Lloyd, the victim's financial advisor and best friend, to meet him there. She was house-sitting for Virginia.
You were coming into the house. You said you came in. Any irregularities?
When Christine Lloyd arrived, she told Inspector Bierce she and Virginia were close friends, and she had been her financial advisor for about 10 years.
Everything seemed normal. But there was something else that I needed to know.
Christine was watching the house while Virginia was in San Francisco the week before the fire.
It was pretty much in place at the time.
But she said she never saw Virginia's body in the dining room.
There was something else that I needed to show.
Christine said she went back to the house right after the fire. She and a friend were there trying to rescue Virginia's items from the burned house. It was then they saw something in the downstairs apartment that Virginia usually rented. Christine said this was unusual because the apartment was vacant. She showed Bierce what she had found in the downstairs rental unit. Christine said she was worried that someone had been staying downstairs.
Before the fire.
She told the detective she noticed something disturbing about the condition of the rental apartment's refrigerator.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
How did this happen?
Christine Lloyd pointed out the refrigerator, and she said that just a week before, it had been totally clean and the shelves had been inside. When she showed it to me, the shelves were out of it, and there was a residue on the bottom of the refrigerator, suggestive of the fact that something had been stored there. And she was telling me that nothing had been stored there the last time she had seen it. How many days before the fire were you here?
I was here a couple of days ago.
In the bedroom, Bierce found a terrible mess.
Looks like somebody's been living in here.
There was a mattress on the floor and bottles strewn everywhere.
Look in here. Look at this.
The uninvited resident had left the apartment in disarray. The refrigerator contained what appeared to be a dark liquid residue that looked like blood. To determine what it was, crime technicians performed a luminol test. Also in the refrigerator, what appeared to be a small clump of hair riddled with maggots. Inspector Bierce had the technician remove the hair clump and take a swabbing of the red liquid.
Swab that liquid.
The samples were sent to the lab for further examination. But it was quickly determined that the substance wasn't blood and the hair did not belong to Virginia. And Bierce made another unusual discovery. The smoke detector for the downstairs unit had been unplugged.
This looks pretty staged. Oh yeah. I went into that room with a very skeptical eye, and it looked staged. That was put there so that somebody would think that somebody had been crashing there, and potentially the person who was crashing there was the person who'd gone upstairs and killed the victim.
Bierce's suspicions continued to grow. Little things about the scene troubled him, like how unusually neat, strategic, and organized the squatter's mess seemed. That despite all the bottles strewn about, there were no bottle caps. There were also no fingerprints on the bottles. To him, the whole scene felt manufactured. Jeffrey Wells examined the hair found in the refrigerator for the presence of maggots. The maggots he found were alive. Types of maggots vary. Those found in the downstairs refrigerator were scuttlefly maggots, different from the flesh fly maggots found on Virginia Bailey's body. The ones in the apartment were insects attracted to rotting food, as well as human remains. All this information troubled Inspector Bierce. But perhaps the most puzzling was the fact that Christine Lloyd said she hadn't seen Virginia's body. After all, she had been dead for at least 3 days. If the body was in the refrigerator, that would support Christine's story. But the science wasn't adding up. If the body was not hidden in the refrigerator, where had it been?
I'm saying, okay, some part of this doesn't make any sense. Either she's aware that the body is there and has played some role in the body being there, or somebody is coming in after the fact and planted the body there. It's not going to make a great deal of sense to me.
Inspector Bierce was beginning to think Christine Lloyd knew more. Perhaps she could shed more light on Virginia's whereabouts before the fire started. He decided to look a little harder at Christine's story. Virginia Bailey was found dead in her Berkeley, California home, and the circumstances surrounding her death were suspicious. The presence of maggots on the body proved she had been dead for some time before the fire. And the story told by the victim's friend, Christine Lloyd, was not adding up.
Come on in, Inspector.
It looked as if Inspector Al Bierce was piecing together a murder.
So how can I help you?
Well, as we talked
The
about
detective met with her to ask her some follow-up questions.
To find out what I can about her habits. She put herself in the house every single day. She put herself into the house as late as 14 hours before the fire. I've got a coroner who's telling me, or who has told me, that the victim's dead for at least 2 days. She's found in an area where Christine Lloyd would have had to have passed through the room within feet of the body to feed the cats and to get the mail. I'm going to leave my card.
It seemed unlikely to Bierce that Virginia could have died of natural causes and lay there for days before the fire ignited.
You can call me or have them call me.
It was time to do some legwork, to learn more about the victim. Bierce began questioning friends and business associates of Virginia's. He started with her co-worker, Mary Cates, who said Virginia wasn't scheduled to go to San Francisco, as Christine had said. Mary also told Inspector Bierce that Virginia had been missing work lately.
Very much out of character, no.
Since this was completely out of character, she said she called Virginia to make sure she was okay. She left a message on her answering machine, but never received a call back from Virginia.
She informed me that...
But said Christine Lloyd called her to tell her Virginia was out of town.
I believe she was at school.
Bierce spoke to several of Virginia's friends, and they all had the same story. When they would call Virginia, they'd get a call back from Christine Lloyd.
Good.
Since Bierce determined Virginia had many friends who were concerned about her whereabouts, he found it odd that no one had actually been able to reach her in the days prior to the fire.
She had missed appointments on the 17th, 18th, and 19th?
Yes, correct.
One friend, Alicia Jackson, was so concerned she headed over to her house to make sure she was okay. But there was no answer. Only a note on the door saying she was in San Francisco. She thought this was odd, but left her own note, hoping to hear back from her missing friend. Bierce was puzzled.
Hearing from anybody we can.
Although all her friends were being helpful, no one offered anything that gave the investigation focus.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Virginia's brother came back to the police station and offered up a charred piece of evidence.
What we got here?
It was Virginia's answering machine, presumably full of messages from concerned friends.
Fire damage to the cassette, pretty well warped.
Inspector Bierce sent the tape to the DOJ crime lab in the hopes of salvaging the burned cassette.
Not sure what we're going to be able to get out.
Perhaps the messages on the machine would lead to answers as to why every time someone tried to make contact with Virginia, they made contact with Christine Lloyd instead.
Be in touch with what we get.
Bierce ran a background check on Christine Lloyd. She came up clean, except for a minor traffic violation. Since Christine was Virginia's financial advisor, Inspector Bierce decided to get a warrant to examine the victim's financial records.
Come on in. Okay. Have a seat.
Bierce went to Virginia's bank for answers. Years of experience taught Bierce, study a victim's finances and you'll likely uncover a motive. Virginia's bank activity had reached a fever pitch in the weeks before her death. Large checks were written against Virginia's account, not only to Christine, but also to a woman named Myrtle Lloyd.
About 50% of the proceeds of that account went to Christine Lloyd. 2 days after the fire.
One peculiar thing Bierce noted was a certified foreclosure letter dated the 13th of June. Christine was responsible for making sure all of the bills were paid on time.
Certified mail.
And she had given him no indication that Virginia was in such severe financial trouble.
Card when she opened the bank.
And another red flag. Something that made no sense for a woman who was in dire financial straits and about to lose her home. A flurry of checks written in June. The end of a 6-month spending spree totaling thousands of dollars. In total, 4 checks were made out to Christine and Myrtle Lloyd. Some dated after Virginia's death. Bierce believed he found a motive: embezzlement. Now he needed some kind of smoking gun. Bierce asked Virginia's manager for ATM surveillance tapes at Virginia's bank.
More checks to draw. I will get back to you with.
He also pored over every financial document he could find.
Do we have one for bleaching?
And there, among the detailed receipts from Virginia's account, came a startling discovery.
One for 2136.
Inspector Bierce found receipts for both an accelerant and a garden hose.
On the 24th, given the date of that purchase and the fact that an accelerant was very possibly used in the ignition of the fire, it provided a nexus between that purchase and the fact that the fire had occurred.
It looked as if Christine had been using Virginia's account. And the purchase of 2 40-ounce cans of lighter fluid and a hose on her account just days before the fire was quickly turning friend into suspect.
Oh, we can put it.
Can you hook it up?
Bierce's next step was to watch the surveillance video provided by Virginia's bank.
Have you queued this up already?
Yeah, this is already queued up.
It contained no surprise. Clear as day, there was Christine Lloyd signing Virginia's checks and deposit slips on checks made out to herself. The checks were in the exact amount of Virginia's missing mortgage payments. One of the checks was dated 3 days before Virginia's death. Yet it was cashed 3 days after her death. It was made out to Myrtle Lloyd. Bierce needed to know who this woman was and if she and Christine were working together to steal Virginia's money. Since their last names were the same, he presumed the two were related. Bierce did a records check on Myrtle Lloyd. What he found out was perhaps the most disturbing thing yet in this perplexing case. Myrtle Lloyd was Christine's mother, and Myrtle Lloyd was dead. It appeared that Christine was not only signing checks on Virginia's account for herself, she was also signing checks made out to a dead woman her own mother. Bierce visited with the Oakland police, who looked into Myrtle Lloyd's death. He wanted details. Captain Ralph Lacer of the Oakland Police Department remembered her story. He told Bierce that Myrtle had been found dead in her bathtub with severe bruises to her face and lacerations to her head.
And she was doing some financial things for her, and it's looking right now like she was taking...
Because there were no obvious signs of foul play, and police believed Christine's story, the coroner ruled Myrtle's death an accident.
After finding no sign of forced entry in the residence, there was no loss in the residence, or no one appeared to have kind of rummaged through the residence. It came out that we didn't see anything that showed it was a hands of another, and at this point they ruled that it was an accidental death.
Maybe would have come across as an accidental death, but knowing what I
Then Bierce learned that Christine Lloyd had found her mother's body.
That she had seen the mother the day before, and that she had left and done some shopping, and then she was bringing some groceries back to the house.
According to the July 1991 police reports, Christine Lloyd said she returned home from the grocery store.
Hello? What's the groceries for you?
She was surprised when her mom was nowhere to be found. It was when she entered the bathroom that she made the startling discovery of her mother's body. Then, things just clicked for the detective. He instinctively knew he had a second murder on his hands, and he was determined to get the evidence necessary to prove it. While investigating the death of Virginia Bailey,
that was my first impression.
Inspector Al Bierce believed he had uncovered another murder, and he was convinced the same killer committed both crimes. The woman who had been so helpful from the beginning was now a suspect.
At that point in the investigation, I knew that she'd killed my victim in Berkeley, and I knew that she had killed her mother 3 years before. And I knew that she had done a very good job of concealing that death 3 years ago to make it look like an accidental death, not murder.
He was beginning to put it all together, but there were still some unanswered questions. Bierce went to the Oakland coroner's office to find out more. Dr. Paul Herman performed the autopsy on Myrtle Lloyd.
When I walked in the bathroom, I would have expected to find a great deal of blood spattered about in the bathroom because of these injuries to the head.
This was not what he thought he'd find. After all, the victim had severe head wounds. There should have been blood everywhere. But then Dr. Herman saw the smallest of clues. He also noticed more signs that the scene had been meticulously cleaned.
This bathroom was clean. The water had been drained from the tub, and there was some debris from decomposition and probably blood at the bottom of the tub, but no spattering of blood around there at all. And that's what I would have expected to see. And expose the bone. But there are
Myrtle Lloyd was killed by 7 separate lacerations to the back of her head. Christine explained that her mother was prone to seizures and said that she had fallen in the bathtub.
And in addition, she had a laceration of her forehead.
Bierce knew things were not adding up. And after visiting Oakland, his suspicions about Christine escalated. He believed the crime scene was too neat, almost in direct contrast to the scene in Berkeley. But both appeared staged nonetheless.
They're crosswise across the back of the head.
To test their suspicions, investigators spoke with Myrtle Lloyd's doctors to determine if she had been ill or had any known conditions that would make her unsteady on her feet. What they found out would break the cold case wide open. Myrtle was in excellent health and had no history of seizures. By now, Detective Bierce was convinced of Christine Lloyd's guilt. He was ready to make an arrest. What he needed was a charge. At this point, there was not enough direct evidence to make a murder arrest. Since Christine had signed Virginia Bailey's name on checks, his best bet was forgery. He turned to handwriting expert Verl Truman, a forensic document examiner with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and asked him to look at the checks for fraud.
Handwriting examination is basically a side-by-side comparison. The basis for the identification of handwriting is the fact that no two persons share the same combination of individual identifying handwriting characteristics. We look for various features and habits of the writer. We look for the way the person makes beginning strokes, ending strokes, or connecting strokes between letters and letter combinations. We look at things such as the relative height ratio and proportion of letters and in relation to other letters.
He found subtle differences between their handwriting styles, which Truman said were patterns and traits that every individual develops over the years.
Now, these characteristics, it's very difficult to cast off your habits when you're either imitating the handwriting of another person or if you're trying to disguise your own writing. Usually some of your habits will still show through.
And Christine was unable to completely disguise hers. But perhaps the most telling sign was not an actual letter or a word,
She makes a star
but a unique and personal signature symbol.
Virginia Bailey used a star as a $sign in her writing, and she constructed that character beginning and ending at the lower left corner or 7 o'clock position. Christine Lloyd, on the other hand, did it completely opposite. She began it and started it at the lower right. That was a feature that she just happened to miss.
Inspector Bierce now had proof of forgery. But what he needed was proof of murder. Bierce decided to take another look at the days prior to the fire. Christine was the only one with Virginia's house key, and the only one who seemed to know anything about Virginia's whereabouts. She had even been returning Virginia's phone messages. At the State Crime Lab, technicians worked to restore the message tape from Virginia Bailey's answering machine.
Stick around. I'll play this.
Investigators were now able to retrieve the messages, although they had no idea what they'd find. By comparing the phone records to the voice messages, Inspector Bierce was able to piece together the chain of events leading up to and following Virginia's murder.
Hey, Virginia, it's me. I haven't heard from you in a while. Where are you? Call me.
The calls reflected a growing concern about Virginia's disappearance on June 13th, 12 days before the fire. And oddly, many of the outgoing calls Bierce found on Virginia's phone records began on that very day.
There was information that came to me during the course of the investigation that suggested that the victim had died on June 13th. That was the last time anybody ever talked to her. And it was the time through phone records that I showed that she had made a call to Christine.
The pieces were falling into place. Bierce felt he was close to being able to make an arrest. He paid a visit to another one of Virginia's neighbors, Sam Watson. Watson told of helping Christine carry a large dining room table, as well as other items, from Virginia's house before the fire. She then sold them at a yard sale.
You selling this table too?
Oh
Christine had denied having any idea what had happened to that table.
Hello. Hi, how are you? Good.
I guess it was about 2 days before.
Every part of Christine Lloyd's story seemed suspect. Investigators believed she was in a frenzy of greed, intent on fully taking over her friend's assets through any means possible.
Step towards me, ma'am. Step towards me. Keep walking. You need to stop. Turn around with your back towards me. Face the house. Face the house.
In early December of 1994, Inspector Al Bierce arrested Christine Lloyd for murder and took her into custody.
Take you to the car. We'll take you to the car. Do you have any weapons? Do you have knives, guns?
Bierce was convinced that Christine Lloyd had masterminded 2 murders.
Hey, Christine?
But he only had enough evidence to bring her in for the murder of Virginia Bailey. He believed she was motivated by money and greed.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything
And he
you say
wanted to see
can-
Christine Lloyd behind bars.
You have the right to an attorney. To have that attorney
Christine
present
Lloyd
when you
refused to speak to police.
can't afford it.
She refused to take a polygraph test.
Charge. You understand those rights as I've
Instead, she asked for her attorney. She was processed into the system. Although Christine Lloyd was sticking to her guns regarding Virginia Bailey, when asked about her mother, she shook her head and told Bierce he was wrong. She said she was a loving daughter who doted on her mother and would never do anything to harm her. Apparently, Christine Lloyd was convincing. At the time of the arrest, the district attorney's office didn't feel comfortable going ahead and prosecuting the case.
What's your name? Christine.
They didn't feel the evidence was strong enough to get a conviction. Her immediate release was ordered.
Please check and make sure everything is there.
As she walked out of the jail, Inspector Al Bierce despaired.
I knew that she had embezzled from her mother, leading up to the murder of her mother. I knew that she had embezzled from my victim, leading to her murder. And from a personal standpoint, that wasn't something I could let go of.
Convinced he was dealing with a murderer who had already killed twice, Inspector Bierce wasn't about to let it rest.
Yes, you are.
He needed more evidence. He turned to forensic scientists to help him bring this killer to justice. Berkeley County investigator Al Bierce pieced together a story of greed, lies, and murder. He was convinced Christine Lloyd killed both her best friend and her own mother. Now, despite nearly a year on the case, hundreds of hours of legwork and compelling evidence,
Please check and make sure
he was watching her go free.
Yes, you are.
I knew she was guilty, and I couldn't let go.
Good night, guys. Night, Glenn.
Al Bierce was now working all hours, trying to plug any holes in what he thought was an airtight case against Christine Lloyd.
Right out, let's go.
The district attorney's office refused to prosecute the case, stating the evidence was circumstantial and it would not hold up in court. But Al Bierce had worked too hard to let this one slip through his fingers.
By the time I got through, when I was at that point in the investigation, I knew that she'd killed my victim in Berkeley, and I knew that she had killed her mother 3 years before. And I knew that she had done a very good job of concealing that death 3 years ago to make it look like an accidental death, not murder.
Bierce approached Thomas Rogers, the head of the trial staff at the DA's office in Alameda County. After hearing the details of Bierce's investigation, he too became determined to bring the case to justice.
I made a commitment that I was going to try the case. In our business, many of the cases are much more interesting than what we see on television. There's a tremendous human drama involved. For anybody who's curious, you have a woman who's 55 years old with no record. Why did she kill her best friend?
This was the question puzzling investigators for over a year.
Hello, Al. Tom Rogers.
But as Bierce and Rogers discovered, it all came down to money.
When he went through the receipts,
Christine Lloyd had been cashing her mother's civil service pension checks. And the men believed that once Virginia Bailey confronted Christine about the house foreclosure, it was only a matter of time before authorities began looking into Christine's finances and found out about Myrtle Lloyd. But despite all the circumstantial evidence, the clear motive of embezzlement, and the testimony of the handwriting analyst, it would be a tough case to try. There was no cause of death, no eyewitnesses, no smoking gun. D.A. Rogers decided to take one last look at the pile of evidence Inspector Bierce had uncovered. After weeks of combing through the findings, he was convinced. The final link to justice and punishment would come down to a tiny piece of living evidence.
The most compelling evidence was the entomology evidence. If we did not have the entomology evidence, we never would have been able to prove the case.
The fact that maggots will only feed on a dead body was the only piece of conclusive proof that Virginia was dead long before the fire. But it was the proof that made Rogers feel comfortable enough to try the case. And it was the one hole in Christine Lloyd's story which all the other lies would come rushing through. She placed herself in the house during the time of Virginia's death and the time of the fire. This would be the crux of the prosecutor's case. That Christine Lloyd had committed Virginia Bailey's murder and spent 2 weeks manufacturing an elaborate crime scene to cover her tracks. In July of 1995, 1 year after the fire that killed her best friend, Virginia Bailey, Christine Lloyd was once again arrested.
Are there any weapons?
Right to remain silent.
But this time, she was headed to trial. Once again, Lloyd refused to speak to the man who had made it his mission to put her behind bars.
You're getting one more chance at your side of the story. It's a pretty quiet trip coming in.
But by now, Bierce and D.A. Rogers had fully patched together what had happened to Virginia Bailey and the events leading up to her murder.
Assuming you're not going to be talking to me. Near trial, we re-investigated and were able to prove through statements and circumstantial evidence that clearly Christine Lloyd had killed her mother. And that the motive then for killing Virginia Bailey was to avoid a re-examination of the mother's death.
Virginia Bailey had no idea her dear friend Christine Lloyd had been embezzling from her. So when she came home on the afternoon of June 13th, 1994, to find a registered foreclosure note from her bank, Virginia was undoubtedly surprised and angry.
She panicked. She found Christine and she said, you know, you're my financial advisor. What is the deal here? There was a 3.5-minute call to Christine's house in Martinez.
At that point, Christine knew she was caught, and it wouldn't be long before everyone knew the deadly secrets she had been hiding for 3 years. She showed up at the house intent on murder.
Letter from the bank foreclosing on the house. I brought the checks out
Using a blunt object, she brutally struck Virginia until she was dead. It would now be up to a jury to determine if Christine Lloyd was the murderous woman Al Bierce was convinced she was. But Al Bierce also wanted justice for Myrtle Lloyd and uncovered that Christine was the sole beneficiary of a $100,000 life insurance policy. So as Christine sat in jail awaiting trial for one murder, the investigation continued on the second. This was enough to indict once again for murder. Driven by the same greed, Christine had inflicted a beating on her elderly mother. Christine Lloyd was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. She received 2 consecutive life sentences. In planning, executing, and covering up their crimes, sometimes murderers think too much. Sometimes it is this over-planning that leads investigators to their front doors. And as long as those investigators are listening for clues, they'll have the forensic resources to back up their hunches. And clever killers will continue to be brought to justice.